Alright, look, I'd like to say welcome to viewers. A conscientious consumerism vibe, a bit pretentious, big words. Right, you've got 10 seconds, everyone's disconnected. I've got about 50 seconds left before a second bunch of people disconnect. So look, let's just acknowledge I'm raising my professionalism. I've got a clipboard, right? It's a board with a clip in it. So I did go to my child's room, expected with all the clipboards I've bought for them, I'd find one. So look, I've only been in there 3 times in months. Like, there was a house inspection recently, so I'd been in there. So I don't like fossicking around in there. I'm sure I would have found a better clipboard and my professionalism would appear better. But look, that's the proper intro to my channel. I like to talk casually. That's why the videos are so long. Even though the topics themselves might be somewhat short, you can see I'm working with leaky pens here and whatnot. So, has the quality improved? Well, yeah, markedly. Look, I'm wearing a blue shirt. That's a sign of authority. I still aren't doing the brush hair and make myself presentable, right? But I am using a good quality microphone. I've given up my ideal shooting location so I can create what is, I believe, a wind buffer. Hearing a bit of echo there. I'm seeing my voice right up at the limit of top, so this will be clear. But I think because I've got everything set up in such a way that the sound of birds in the background should be low. It should be one of my better videos for clarity, for ease of listening, if you will, ease of viewing, not so much. But look, I've got pens in my pocket, right? That makes me a bit of an authority. I think a pencil makes me a bit more of a carpenter, a bit more blue collar. That's the alignment with the blue shirt, right? And the fact that it's open, it's like less of an authority figure. But if you go to adding a lanyard or something around your neck, that can make you a bit more authority figure-ish. What do you reckon? Yeah, time to spin on with it. What's today's video about? Okay, well it's about BIOS updates, right? Now there is a reason to spin on, but trust me, you don't want to know about BIOS updates either. Firmware updates and software updates, right? To hardware, all your sound bars and your fans and your toothbrushes and your DVD players and all that sort of stuff, right? And that's all going on in the background without your awareness. And that's why it's actually today's topic, is that equipment's getting broken. Now, I need to, that's basically the intro there. Look, here's every time a car goes past, I should just push on to the next section, right? I've sort of broken it down into 5 sections, but the cars are going to go past a fair bit because of my location, so I just have to deal with that. BIOS updates. Yeah, look, I must admit, this is not the video I wanted to do today. I'd rather talk about things that actually matter to we as people, like not becoming the food source during the next pole shift when the weather patterns change. I mean, it freezes and our neighbours, probably the lizard people underneath us decide that, humans. Do you want to be fuel for some other civilization? No, I mean, that's the topic of a future video. Yeah, so, zany, right? Anyway, car, moving on. So, look, I must admit, I don't want to talk about BIOS updates, right? They are a cause of frustration, right? I've actually worked for businesses, point blank, won't do them, right? Like computer businesses, when it's really our job to do them because we're always told, make sure you turn you got it on power that can't be taken away from it. So in the computer business, you'd want to be using an uninterruptible power supply, just so that if the wall power went out while you were firmware updating, it wouldn't break. Why is that? Because the firmware can control everything. The BIOS, basic input-output system. Your computer has a little BIOS, right? And when the computer turns on, that little thing just checks itself. It goes, oh, what am I? What do I have attached to me? What am I actually doing? What can I do, right? And then it hands over when an operating system starts loading, and it actually has the ability it's what allows everything to start, really. But that little bit of chip, that little bit of firmware at the start that actually says, hey, this is what I am, this is what I can do, really important. Now, arguably, BIOSes through the times have been something that's been pro-consumer, something that's been to our benefit, it's been our option when we want to do them, right? Possibly to add features, but I think I'll put that further onto this, where I'm going to just talk negatively about BIOSes in the modern world, right? And I kind of wanted to wind up with a paragraph a little bit strong about, hey, there's actually some good reasons for them, right? There's some jangle. I hope that wind isn't coming back this way. Oh, I went to so much effort. I gave up on my good filming location to be here. Yeah, the mic's somewhat low. Wind cuts on, but maybe not high enough. Okay, I'll continue. Sorry if I'm too loud, sorry if the ambient sound is too loud. I don't want to drop my microphone 10 dB now. It's everyone that's just set the level to this and then to have it drop. Right, so what got me out of bed to do this? Well, I mean, I'm out of bed already, right? Like, this is part one before I'm even to part two. So part two is me listing all the parts that have just recently failed on me, right? So that you've got a reason for why I'm doing this, why it's personal to me. But look, I got out of bed this morning early. You know, you could say I'm stressed. This is why my presentations are still low, so I don't brush my hair before I do these videos. So we're not at the professional level yet. I'm not doing editing, right? We're not there yet. Yeah, I rolled out of bed, but I've improved my strategy a little bit today. I went back to what I was doing a year or so ago, and I sort of did my meditation tape to find my zen, and I kind of wrote down some notes as I was going through that. Probably broke me out of my moment, right? So there is a little bit of effort that I have to put into for these, right? Nobody watches them, so if you're actually watching this, that's you, right? You're watching this. This is all for you. You're like, spit on, I'm not interested in the topic. The guy's not as funny as he might think he is in order to present. So, look, why is it that we lose sleep? Why is it that I'm a mess and need to meditate? You know, that's fatigue, it's burnout, it's all the stresses of the modern world. In the last couple of days in particular, I've been just a bit aggrieved, right, with all the extra stuff in life we've got going on, and really, we buy our entertainment stuff for the downtime, right? We work those hard jobs, right, and all the stress that we have in the modern world, and all paying our bills and propping up all the big businesses. That's what we're here for. We're the peons, just to earn the money, a little bit of it, to then commit to 30 years of paying off a house so that everybody else profits but us. And yeah, hopefully one day we own some legacy and we can have children. You know, we feel confident. If you ever watch the movie Idiocracy, you know, the people who are capable of living are the ones that aren't breeding. So we're kind of going downhill. That being said, I've been a breeder, as my uncle would refer to me. So, you know, some people have issues with that. Some people, yeah. But I mean, I've moved on to the stage in life where I like my entertainment. So I like it when my equipment works. I work hard for my equipment, arguably. And if you're hardly working, right, you've got time to actually use said entertainment platforms and whatnot. Right? You've probably got the time to do firmware updates. And it's because of people like you, right, the industry is kind of treated that you're not really a saleable customer, right? Because when you've got a problem with an issue, with a device, you ring up and you complain, right? So they actually generally fix it. But everybody just wants to cut you out of the market. So all items are being priced a little bit higher. And that's been going on for a while. But now we get firmware updates on high-end equipment and it breaks it. That's kind of sad because we work so hard and we get so little of our income left over towards the entertainment. We get so little time left to enjoy the entertainment. So when we have downtime with said entertainment, right, the thing that should be used to actually lull us, you know, like the hot water bottle, hot water bottle, or the pacifier at some level, right? All of our sound bars and whatnot, they should be for our enjoyment. They should be the rewards for all the hard-earned work, and they're not. And they're forcing us forward. Now, there's nothing wrong with being forced forward, arguably, if the direction we're going in is pro-consumer, pro-us, right? We know it isn't. I've got lots of other videos. Conscientious consumer, right? Pretentious bloody name. So I don't label any of my videos that. I'm not really sure where I'm at. I guess it's the theme of my channel, so it's technically where I should be at. So let me give some examples of some bits that have just given up the ghost on me of late. Right? You've given up the ghost. I mean, that's a PC term. Right? I guess it stems from the concept of major religions, Christianity, for example, and the Holy Ghost, and the notion that in us is a spirit or something, right? So in the computer world, you talk about things a little bit more physical, a little bit more concrete, and the joke was always, computers, no, they run on smoke. Yeah, if the smoke escapes, they stop running, right? So once upon a time, the smoke, the what's in them, that intangible concept of what actually makes that device work, well, I guarantee you, it's regulated or controlled by the BIOS, right? So BIOSes matter. So I've had a few devices that have gone downhill fairly strongly after a BIOS update. And okay, I had a Samsung phone that through forced firmware updates, forced, right? You can't get the new platform update without it ripping you off of these things. And they force you forward because you can't connect, you can't go to the shop, you can't do this, right? So it's all hoodwinked and all unified like that in such a way that you have to take it. And they robbed me of a Bluetooth codec. Okay, now I'm having a whinge and a rant. Trust me, I've got a few devices. I'll spin on this one quite quickly, but I'll show you why it can be anti-consumer and why businesses use it to sell. And yeah, in my case, because Samsung were now selling a crappy Bluetooth codec of their own, and they were trying to force their own little Bluetooth buds on everyone and pretend that they're really good. You got to remember, Samsung's about 1 in 5 phones, right? There's about 22% of the global market of telephones in that ballpark, 20 to 25, which means they're either 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 phones. It's the people around you who have one of these devices. So, you know, straight away it's about 25% of my viewers might be affected by this, or certainly one of their family members maybe, unless you're in a fully Apple ecosystem, which is quite likely. So yeah, they threw an update. They robbed all the old Bluetooth codecs that gave high quality sound. Right? They were all built into the Google platform, the Android operating system that all the Samsung phones ran. And their team would go out of their way to pull out basic bits of the operating system, or the driver package, if you will, that was standard, as given, with Android, on every device, had been on their device from day one, and they pulled it out. Right? And it was also that if you didn't have the advanced codecs for Bluetooth sound, you were forced back to good old SBC, subband codec, the really basic Bluetooth codec that's been around for 25 years thereabouts. It doesn't offer a lot of sound quality. It can. It's up for developers to open it up, use as much kilobits as they want, but it hasn't got the advanced compressions. It does mean a fair bit of wireless frequency to move, very, very average amount of sound quality, arguably. So they give you SBC, and I guarantee you they didn't open up the profile or give it a huge amount of data, because they didn't want it to be good anymore. But they took away all your aptexes, high def, they didn't support I guess they gave us LDAC because that's kind of market standard now. The one that we weren't going to get through BIOS updates we did get, that is a positive for them, because Sony couldn't sell their codec to anyone, they weren't selling their devices, they realised it needed to be open up market so that everyone could have access to it, so that maybe people might get invested in LDAC as a codec. But the good ones, the aptex high def, they're good because they're very good uses of compression to achieve sound that I would argue I prefer aptex high def over LDAC for a range of reasons. So yeah, less data moving, more reliable in busy built up areas. There's reasons why you want to use them. But also the open market one, which is LHDC, which was meant to be for low latency, but also a high def codec. The HWA, I think it was called initially, but it came to market, they were sort of stabilised. Nowadays it should be base included with Android. But yeah, no, your modern Samsung phones, right, you'll get your Samsung codec, right, possibly SBC and LDAC, arguably. But pretty disappointing, because I've had phones where they didn't have it. They came with it out of the box, that's why I bought it. Yeah, you got my high quality sound via Bluetooth, got really expensive headphones, really happy with them. And then Samsung, because they want to sell me crappy earbuds that I'm never in a million years going to buy, and they don't make a product at a level that I'm interested in. I don't want to use their codec ever. Have no need for it. Don't want to be forced to use it. Don't want to be forced to downgrade my sound or have to rebuy products. So yeah, they pulled out. And I'm going back to like the Note 7, which was that phone that was a bit notorious, was apparently having issues, and they kept recalling it. But I still use one. I was such a fan of that phone, one of the best phones ever built, that I went out of my way to get one. And I've had 3 of them. 2 of them I forcibly had to give back. Couldn't get on a plane without the second one going back. But I ordered another one. Greenpeace, I think, had some attitude with them that, like, look, you can't just landfill that many phones. So I got the fan edition, the 3rd iteration of the phone. And when I got it, it had these codecs, but over time they removed them. And people complain, but and at one point they even gave it back to us. And then through later updates, again, it was pulled out. You can see the direction they were going in. You can see the way the ethics of these companies are. Is if enough people complain, maybe they'll do something about it, but only until enough people have moved on from that device, and then they'll screw you out again, right? So that's the foundation of this discussion. It might not be affecting you now, but at any point in the future, any of your equipment will get destroyed or deprecated on you, right? So that's one of the points I want to come back to later, because that's the real issue. So these companies, they need to make money, they need to force us forward. They can't have us keep using our old equipment. Anyway, getting sidetracked. Soundbar by LG. This one was pretty horrible. It was a flagship soundbar, Meridian Sound, something that whilst I've got lots of potential, I've got access to flagship home theatre amps, and that's been my living, my profession a lot through life. I've got the speakers, I've got the know-how for setting this stuff up. I've got one of the SPL meters and the calibration mics. I like having 13 speakers in a room and lots of multiple subs. That for me is a level of sound. I like just clear dialogue. It doesn't have to be turned up. I just like being able to hear what the actors are saying. TV sound doesn't really do it for me. Can do, I guess. Some sound is better than no sound. So I do have access to a soundbar. It's got Meridian sounds right up. There's a Dolby Atmos soundbar. It's got ARC, probably not E-ARC. Again, like you can argue that a chip is needed. That couldn't just be a firmware inclusion. They couldn't maybe give us that. I'd like to think that these BIOS updates could be used to give us features. Once upon a time they were. But instead of that, they made the product unusable. They'd make it so that when you hit buttons, when you first turned it on, right, so you'd wake up your console, little HDMI signal would go down the line and say, "Oh, wake up." So the soundbar would wake up, and then it would wake the TV up. Everything's kind of working the way it should be there. And but then because the TV's woken up, and there's a little thing called ARC coming back on a different HDMI, on the same HDMI cable it connects to the TV, right? The one that's just sent the signal down to say TV wake up. The TV's then woken up and gone, okay, I'm awake. And then the soundbar's gone, oh, hang on, ARC, audio return channel, I better switch over to that. And then it doesn't switch over to that. That would still be usable, but then for whatever reason would switch over to a fibre optic input that I don't even have anything plugged in on. Firmware update, right? So the Panasonic TV, right, that it was connected to, right? So I ripped it out. I've gone back to a surround sound system or stereo system actually. In the den setup, I've got a reference panel, right? So 4K UHD, all the fruit, right? But reference, right? And I calibrate it. I go to effort to go out of my way with red, green, and blue channels, and even the sub channels, and just get that colour absolutely perfect, right? OLED TVs, all TVs, over time might need a calibration. Now, tube gun TVs, 20 years ago, you might calibrate them after 8 years. You might raise the brightness a little bit on your red gun or something. But realistically, we didn't really tune the old tube TVs, even though we might get 20, 25 years of use out of them. Basically, most people just wanted to get a bit more brightness out of them over time, so they'd push the brightness up a bit, arguably. But yeah, modern TVs, LCDs, certainly OLEDs are one that because they're individual pixel elements, picture elements, each of the cells, if you will, are made up of, they're the actual emitters of light, right? So unlike an LCD which has a backlight and it's got layers in front of it, basically trying to block out that light from coming through, and the light shines through whichever colours are left to be seen, right? So it's a little bit different. But the way OLEDs work is that because the actual pixels themselves are the illuminator of the room, they're what causes the light, they generally are quite bright, right? There's a reason why they run hot. There's a reason why getting extreme brightness into an OLED is a difficult thing. Because of that, and because of the perishable nature of the OLED crystals themselves, the cell structures, with all that heat to get that brightness, which is the competitive war at the moment is in HDR, how bright can you go? They perish over time, and they don't all perish equally, arguably. You kind of want to alter your red, your green, your blue a little bit different. So I would argue, because I've got the ability to calibrate, it's my own time, it's my own TV, I appreciate it when it's where it should be, just pictures pop that much better. I tune basically every 6 months, maybe at latest once every year. I think there's times I've gone 1.5 years between calibrations, and when I do, wow, the picture quality improvement. You can get a basic TV, if you set the calibration up right, it looks a lot better, it looks really good, right? So that calibration is everything. And when you buy the absolute top of the line model, it's to get more access in granular control over the config or the setup. So they updated themselves a little bit meanly, against my wishes. I thought I was just getting a Disney update. This is actually under my chapter of Sneaky, which I'm going to come back to in a second. But let's just say I lost my calibration. I lost my digital sound output, so I couldn't feed back to my nice gate and run through the speakers. I was back to having to use TV sound. Or possibly, buy a new soundbar. Or, more likely, buy a Fire Stick or some other device like an Apple TV in order to use it, right? Because that's the thing. This is why these breaks happen, right? Anyway, Panasonic stopped selling their TVs in many, many markets, and the problem is with these companies, you can't really get in contact with them to get these things fixed. But let me move on. The big one was my PC. Yeah, Windows, through forced updates, and also it not wanting gaming PCs to really be a thing, it was quite happy to cripple my CPU speed by about 20% on a couple of occasions, right? So not just once. They went for about, it was a bit more than 10% on the first occasion, and then they did it on 3 occasions. where they gradually pulled they were crippling, they were removing, getting in mediocre performance. They were taking the cache away on my CPU, so it was becoming less and less math effective over time. It was an engineered fake security update where they just went, security updates, we're allowed to force this on you, right? And they did it through Windows, and I had about 3 or 4 of the same platform, set up with nephews and whatnot, and over time, they'd bring the speed down of these processes, but in the process of doing these first forced firmware updates with my operating system updates I can't say no to, they actually broke a couple of my machines. In the process of doing the updates, they don't care. Remember, as a computer, I've worked for computer mobs that are like, no, we don't do firmware updates because of the inherent risk. If something goes wrong when you're doing it, like, you can leave the hardware broken. So to say that the Windows PC doing its update didn't do it very smoothly across all my machines, and losing hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of hardware, it's just like the soundbar, it all becomes useless. Useless. So, sneaky, I reckon they're sneaky. That soundbar, for example, I was connecting some Bluetooth music to it, and it went, okay, your phone's got data, I'm going to check for a firmware update. I'm going to use your phone's modem now to download my update and sneak it on the back end without even telling you. It self-destroyed itself just in the process of me using it. No option to say no, right? And in all my menus and all my devices, I go, no, I'll do manual firmware update checks, thanks. That was certainly the way the TV was set up, but it pretended, when I was firing up one of the TV platforms, Disney, in fact I'll give the names because it's quite specific as to how deep the rabbit hole goes. When I was firing up the Disney software, it went, a new version of the software is available, right? Usually that means you're updating the Disney front-end software, right? You're not doing a firmware update. And then I watched it download, and I went, okay, that's around about normal time. That's hard for users to gauge when we've got such high-speed data, but I usually keep track of, okay, roughly how much data is that you just downloaded. My router, which I used for 25 years, kept track of every point of data around the house. I could just see that died 2 weeks ago. Really sad I lost that. I could have gone and watched it and gone, okay, that's 20 megabytes or something. I'll be able to figure out, okay, what's that? Is that software? That's the same size as the firmware update in my machine. Oh, that's interesting. In this case, that's exactly what would have happened. Because when I watched it kind of reboot itself and installing it, I realised that's not software, that's a firmware update. So when the machine rebooted, when the TV turned back on, I should say, I couldn't log into any of the other TV networks. I'd forgotten their passwords and whatnot. Disney, I had to reset up all the others, like right down to the fact that, this hardware isn't even recognisable to us. Like, you've never registered this before, top level of firmware update. It's an evil one. Disney, Disney knew its password login, right? It was absolutely the only one that was unaffected. Now, okay, that's a small thing. You go, okay, look, remembering a password after a firmware update's not so difficult. Well, funny that, because it wiped away all my calibration data. And from that point forward, a little bit sneaky. Under sneaky, I've got to fail. This is something I want to move on to in a moment. But look, I mean, the PC update was sneaky and evil. It was against my wishes. The soundbar is sneaky and evil. For the sake of keeping a video a little bit shorter, here comes a car. I'll basically move on. So the attitude of to fail. Let me say that again. Right? The attitude of to fail. Right? That's why these things generally seem to be happening. So the TV, I noticed over the last few days, is turning on in the wee hours of the morning or random times of day. I can see the light change from a yellow to red state. So one's in standby, one's technically off. At no point is it turning itself on. Now, I understand the nature of the OLED screens is they can do panel maintenance outside of hours. I have mine set up to ask me my permission, and I have it set to a schedule where generally when it's turning off, sometimes it'll say, it's time, do you want to? But I like to manually do everything just to keep track of what's going on. Well, after this last firmware update, it's doing stuff in the background. Now, I don't know if it snuck another firmware update on, but I know my TV stopped doing firmware updates years ago, right? This TV is probably 8 years old, the one that it got. I've got another one that's a year newer. And I certainly won't be running Disney on it anymore. I won't be letting the firmware update come to it, because losing not just my colour calibrations, but now when I run any of the TV networks, using the inbuilt apps built onto the microprocessor in the TV. It's one of the smart TVs, so it runs a little operating system, it's got the ability to fire up the software on it, rather than having to use an external device. And on any of the software that now runs on it, I can't run any of the advanced colour profiles. I can only run the default normal and like a bright or a vivid mode. It's taken away 6 other modes 4 of them are user adjustable, and 2 of them are the ones with the pro level adjustment that allow me to really get into the nitty gritty level and make it absolutely perfect. So right now, even if I could fire up, which I can, I've gone in and re-registered some of the other TV apps and just found out they're exactly the same. They will not feed sound out anymore out of my fibre optic output at all. Right? It's not just a case of, oh, it's Dolby Digital and not PCM. No, PCM, I can't use my DAC outside of the telly because that hardware is no longer working. It is, a little red light coming down the fibre optic cable, but it's not talking a language, it's not talking at all to downstream equipment. They've broken it. They've taken away features on my telly and they've made it so that basically the reference best panel you can buy is, in my eyes, completely useless. And a ghastly picture. Did I mention the age? Yeah, I would recalibrate about every 6 months. And it's an 8-year-old TV, right? So it's, in my eyes, about 16 calibrations out of whack. And that's what I'm stuck with now if I want to actually use it for picture. In a convenient way, or in a way that the family would use it. And that's where they get me. The soundbar, in a convenient way, in a way which the family would use it, taken away, right? Because it makes it so you don't get sound and that you've got to muck around, and they choose the option that is the most amount of button presses to get it back to the input that you need to get it to, right? That's how they default it. They don't wish to fix it. They're just trying to create enough jank that we, the people, go, ah. But I was talking about the notion of watching it, building it to fail. And that's the real issue, is that I'm watching, if it's doing a panel servicing, as often as I now think it is doing a panel servicing, they're rapifying its end of lifetime. So the big issue with BIOS is they're not recoverable. You can't go back to an older one. You can on high-end PC motherboards where you're overclocking and you're basically always running at the bleeding edge and trying to hurt the thing. And as a feature, they'll sell you for a little bit more money a premium version of the motherboard with multiple BIOSes, right? With a dedicated button you can hit to go to the other one, or you know, just so you can get out of trouble if you set your settings completely wrong and you need to get it back up and running. But this notion of you can't really revert a BIOS firmware. Once something's forced on you, these updates, unless that manufacturer decides to go, oh, we're going to play consumer ethics again and we're going to look after you and we're going to pay money for someone to maintain a product that's out of age, out of our duty of care under law, right? They're never going to. And they're going to use the argument, oh, no, it's outside of the service life. Well, okay, then why did you service it outside of its service life to break it, right? That would be my question right there. But, I mean, arguably, they would say it's to add features, right? There once was a time, that's what it was all about. Okay, I want to give here, we used to have the idea of firmware updates. It was good faith. We believed that we had faith that the device might gain new features over time, and I've got a music player. That's the case. You could say that they rush it to market and it's not ready. Yeah, that's true. But over time they'll stabilise it and they'll fix all the, you know, when it's a pocket knife, a veritable, it can do everything under the sun. Sometimes those features aren't well tested. Sometimes they don't work perfectly well. So the notion of over time, you can update it yourself. Fantastic. You can choose whether something isn't working for you right and whether you want to improve it. So by an ethical company like FIO, my music player, mate, their firmware rollouts, whoa, they're fantastic. They really are. Now, you could say that the products are quite janky on launch. Generally, that's the case. But over a couple of years, even outside of their warranty time, they give them these incredible updates that really, really do improve them, right? But that's not always the case. And the problem is that the companies just want to use we've got features here, you need to buy the new item, as a way to sell us new items. And so, like, I've got an example. I had a Sony, it was a full frame camera, it had a stabilised platform on it, sensor shift. And it's used to take shake out. If you're not on a tripod like we are now, if you're walking along, basically you're trying to take a photo, a little bit of handshake, right? It might just give you a little bit more latitude with shooting in low light conditions or something. It was a much needed feature, and especially you can buy an image stabilised lens. You can move the little lens elements to correct for handshake. That's quite good because the lens is off axis to where you're holding it. But to have that stabiliser built into the camera, I mean, I could use all my legacy lenses, old lenses from other camera systems even, on this new super technical body with this feature. And that was a feature I desperately wanted. There was a reason for me to buy that hardware as soon as it was released. Oh, cool, you've got the sensor shift. So some scientists around the world came up with a way to use that sensor shift to do incredible macro photography, where essentially at the time of taking a photo, it would take possibly 5 photos. It would move the sensor and just take a little bit off to the edges, and then it would stack them. Now, I think the way the scientists built it, and I think the way the subsequent Sony cameras might have initially built it, was that you had to actually do some computer software, or actually had to have the computer hooked up to the camera hooked up to a computer in order to use that feature. But even though that feature was developed by people who weren't Sony, because they had a scientific need for it, that feature never came to my camera. It came to the next camera as a cell feature. And so I was a bit disappointed by that. I expected that feature to come to my camera. So out of ethics, right, off that entire camera system. I won't buy another one of their camera systems. And in fact, out of consumer ethics, every chance I get to dig at them, right? You lost one of my cameras on a factory recall, wasted hundreds of hours of my life. You wouldn't even respond to me, Sony, you bastards. No, sorry, anyone else. I'm not trying to be angry at the lens. But this is something I want to chat about, right? Because what we need to do is hold these guys accountable. So right now, in the middle of the video, and I'll probably remember again at the end, hopefully, leave a comment. And not about personal stuff, just write like this manufacturer, this product, and then what they did to it. Try to keep that fairly short, or use capital letters, certainly for that first line where you do the company, and then the product, and then specifically the model, arguably. If it's got a casual English name, put that first, and then a specific model, put that next. And that way we can just build up a bit of a list. And if anyone wants to come along and just thumbs up comments, so don't make the comments personal about how it hurt you, just list physically, like quite, not opinion, just list quite factually, this is what they broke, right? And so if anyone else comes along and goes, oh yeah, thumbs up on that basically means, yeah, they got me too, right? So just, if we can use our likes for people's comments on particular hardware that's been destroyed, deprecated, it might be a useful video feed, right? It might be that not that I believe any of my videos will gain traction, but if this one got some traction, it might be that it's practical and useful to people. But yeah, anyway, these products used to be sold to us in good faith, right? So Blu-ray players, it might be, they need to roll out security updates. So sometimes you put a disc in, the disc go, oh, you need to update the firmware in order to play this disc, right? That's more a security platform. But regarding software, for example, they can add the ability to play Disney, right? So when we first sold it, you only had Netflix. Over time, you got Amazon Prime. Disney came along as a market player, and it's like, oh yeah, you can now update it. You can put Disney on it. So that was the TV. I'll give you an example of just a little bit earlier. That 8-year-old Panasonic OLED. When it first sold, I think it only had Netflix. Over time, I could add Prime. I could add Disney. Arguably, when I bought the second OLED TV, it was HDR10, but it was also HDR10 Plus. And the belief was that the standard still was settling. Dolby Vision was sort of on the horizon maybe, but at this stage, certainly with the older TV, the notion that firmware updates might allow the TV to become the new standard, so that even though we haven't quite settled on what the HDR was, it's like, oh, but now we know, right? So I had a modem in the 90s. 33 baud was the standard thing. It was a 56 baud modem, 56 kilobyte. That'd be good. Yeah, kilobyte. That'd be really good. No, kilobit probably. Yeah, kilobit. So it could move a little bit of data. It could do a bit more if the telcos upgraded their modems to also support it. But because there was a couple of competing standards of what was going to be, it was K56 Flex, there was X2, US Robotics was my modem. It had an updatable firmware that you could go either which way, right? So that's an example of a BIOS update being used in a way that was pro-consumer, that a future feature or a future standard, if it's settled, that we'd be able to use it. So with the Blu-ray players, that was the notion, like, oh, okay, that software's going to come out, I'll be able to keep my player relevant. So in the case of the TV, which is running the same operating system as my Panasonic Blu-ray player, the TV got Disney, the Blu-ray player didn't. Right, so even though it's running the same chip, arguably running the same operating system, everything, the operating system, the software was written for that platform. All they had to do was authorize it to allow it to download on that Blu-ray player, and I'd be out of trouble right now. I'd be able to fire my sound off to my home theatre receiver using HDMI. I wouldn't have any of these dramas of having to use fibre optic out of the television. I certainly wouldn't have risked doing a firmware update on my TV, which was going to take away my colour profiling. So look, there is examples of good use, right? And good use, look at another really good one is the iFi Diablo. It's a DAC or an amp, a headphone DAC or amp. And using firmware updates, you can change the filters, right? So I run the GTO, the Gibbs Transient Optimized filter. For me, that's perfect. I really like that. I like the fact that I can rotate between 3 different filters. But, I mean, these companies, they don't want us, whilst they say, yeah, you've got the freedom to do that, and they sell that as a feature, like, oh yeah, we're not quite ready, and in all the advertising literature, these features to come, they never did. Physically on their advertising materials, they said this feature will come via firmware update, never did. Not GTO, other things that I wanted. They promised me I would get it. I bought the product, never happened, right? But here's an example, right? Like, in my case, to use the Diablo, I have to hook it up to a computer and I have to run the risk of breaking it every time I do a firmware update, right? If the power gets cut for some reason, if something goes wrong, I've got a brick, right? When the device turns on and it gets to that stage of what am I, if the software that's meant to be saying, oh, this is what I am, isn't working, right? The thing basically is, generally it's unrecoverable. That's it. It's a tossable item. Nobody's going to desolder the firmware. The storage location of where that software for the firmware is stored, that little couple of bytes of information, a couple of hundred bytes, they get up to about a gigabyte in size. In fact, the PS3 consoles, they ran out of the 256 megabytes of storage space for the firmware on the chip, and they'd actually store 3/4 of the firmware on the hard drive. And so if you pulled the hard drive out, you got into a world of pain. Anyway, there's some funky things regarding firmware updates. And in the case of my i5 Diablo, look, it's nice that I can roll my own, but their more expensive items actually have a dedicated button where you can switch between filters, right? They dedicate a little bit more storage space internally so that you could actually have them all in parallel and swap between them, right? But because mine's saving a little bit of money, arguably it's improving the sound quality by having less chips in there and less buttons. I mean, less failing for the manufacturer to deal with. They put the costs on us, right? If it bricks on us, right, and it's out of warranty, or even if it bricks on us and it's in warranty, maybe they can turn around and say, no, user error. But if, if they put a dedicated button in that, and that button for whatever reason stops working, then we're entitled under law to say, oh, that's a warranty issue. That button that switches between modes doesn't really work. So for whatever reason, bringing the cost down, my part, like the more expensive parts, didn't have the button. They chipped out a little bit on the storage on it. So double-edged sword, is this notion of firmware updates. I mean, we know that businesses ultimately are going to be all about saving money. So I'm not seeing a world where the firmware updates are any more working for us, the people. They're certainly just working in favour of the companies at a time when the companies are trying to bring the costs of all their items, they're arguably trying to bring them down because everything otherwise would have to go up after recent world events. What we're actually seeing is they're building them a lot cheaper so that the cost can basically stay the same, but then they're also going, look, if we sell the modifications we've made as an improvement, we can sell it for a little bit more money and consumers will buy into it. So we're kind of getting, not only are the parts being cheaper, they're selling for higher, and that's a standard feature that's happening across a range of businesses. And so that's pretty significant. Now, I haven't covered everything off my little to-do sheet here. There's couple of things that, I mean, it was sad with that Blu-ray player that they never gave me the option to run Disney, right? Otherwise I'd be out of trouble right now, right? So this notion that once upon a time firmware updates were for us, they're not anymore, that's pretty poor. The fact they're sneaky and they try to sneak them in as if it's software updates that we want and it's not, and then they're breaking them on us, or, as I say, it's in the wee hours of the morning, my TV is possibly optimizing itself on a schedule that's like way more than it's ever done in the past. And that optimization phase is a phase where it's cycling all sorts of the pixels in a way that it's arguably wear and tear at a pretty intense level versus watching regular TV that I don't really want to do. So yeah, look, I've got a few other things to say. I mean, the big one for me is that this comes back to phones. If you're in the Apple ecosystem, they make money from their store, right? So they don't mind if they sell you a phone and they'll service it for many years, right? They'll give you software updates for many, many years because they've got other avenues of their business that will make money. But for every other platform holder, they're made up of parts made by a bunch of different manufacturers who only get their coin when you buy a new part, right? So there's no option for device longevity. And when any company can turn around and say, oh no, for the need of the security, we need to force this update. And that update can make the device run slower or take away aspects of your battery life, either because it's, for a range of reasons, changing the profile of how it uses. And as I've just given you some examples, they can break stuff on us. When companies, if you're like the modem chip inside of a phone and you only get money when a phone is sold, right, and you need more phones to be sold, there's nothing to stop you from saying, oh, security update, and then getting in mediocre performance on the old part, and just in order to sell the new one. So sadly, at a time when business is showing very little ethics for the end users, this is something we need to be aware of. That's probably why I've done this video. So look, based on my PC as an example, 7 years after it had come to market, and it was seriously a good computer still, it could flog anything out there, and that was why it happened, was that the chip maker of it, the new chips they were making were built at a lesser price point, couldn't compete with the really expensive ones they'd sold in the high-end space years previously, and they knew in a couple of benchmarks that that huge amount of cache on my chip would allow it to perform some math functions in a way that would possibly make the new CPU look rather average, like it was. They didn't want anybody to be able to see that. They knew that if they just took away from me those features, and they basically would, your end of life. Anyone that's using a computer that's that old, they haven't got money. They're not going to lawyer up. So, you know, we need. There's no industry watchdog for any of this stuff. Governments don't regulate these things. It basically has always been that we let the market themselves sort this stuff out. Consumer ethics just is not in the eyes of any of the companies that we're working with, it would seem, that we buy our products from. I mean, I try to, this channel, Conscientious Consumer, generally about buying really good brands. Really disappointed that my Panasonic TV went down. That was a bit sad. Neither here nor there on the LG soundbar, neither here nor there on a Samsung phone. I know those companies in particular, they like to misrepresent their spec sheets. They play the constantly moving you forward games and just make out like they're parts of all that. When often they're not. Don't miss my Sony camera anymore. Don't miss anything to do with Sony because of the fact that they are very much a company. That's more so Sony cameras. They had 5 different divisions of their business. They've shrunk them down a little bit. Sony Entertainment, which is responsible for a lot of the movies we get to watch and possibly gaming consoles. That's a little bit different. Those things get firmware updates, but seriously, they need them. Oh man, their operating system's so jank. That's an example of it would be for a good reason where we get the update and they add features. And they did. They recently added Dolby Atmos as a sound output method. So that's great as an example of an update that worked pro-consumer. So look, this whole video is a down thing. Firmware updates are something that happen. We need them, arguably. But the direction that we're going in and the fact that the industry is basically unregulated means that basically someone with a clipboard needs to come along, real clipboard, and hold these guys accountable and hold them up to a certain standard. And it needs to be that you can't just exit these things. And this is partly what this channel's about, is we have to buy long-term reliable products. If our long-term reliable products are not in any way reliable, then we've got real issues. The planet has real issues. The planet can't afford to have us posting all this stuff around the planet constantly and digging all these primary resources up to make these things in a disposable way. Right? That's not the direction we need to go in. So on the basis of your hard-earned money needs to work for you, that's a legitimate reason for you to be concerned about this going on in the future, and it will, and it's going to ramp up, it's going to get a lot worse. But from the attitude of if you give a care for your children or the next generation, or just people being able to live with happiness because they're not being constantly ripped off, then there is a reason to actually be concerned about this as a practice. So look, it'd be nice if I could give some steps in terms of how to fix this. I guess I'm always saying, hey, back me, make me a voice, you know, but I don't really want to do that. I don't want to be in front of cameras. I've got this awareness, so I'm putting the information out there. It is true, I would like to hold these people accountable for it. It is true, if I had a voice, if I was seen as something significant to be on the radar of by these manufacturers, because I might talk dirt about them on my video feeds. Yeah, that would require me having a voice. I don't even have enough people backing me as like, yeah, this guy's worth watching. I can't do live videos. So look, this is now going to get uploaded probably in a day's time. It'll be on the net, and here it is for you. I'm glad that we got here to this point in it. If you just skip to this point to see is there a good conclusion, not yet. Let's work together. We can do better, peoples. Have a great day.